first of all, let's start 2-year anniversary.
Yeah.
What's going through your mind?
Well, one, it's hard to believe it's been 2 years. You know, our work on this case certainly hasn't stopped, and I think that's part of the reason why it's hard to believe that it's been 2 years is because we've been so committed. It's also just hard to believe how much has transpired in 2 years, and the fact that we really have no answer still. I mean, we don't know where Noel is yet. We're still working those angles. We don't have Cindy back yet. So, you know, when you think about 2 years' time, what all can occur in 2 years' time, having those two things that are missing from this case are pretty paramount, and it's hard to deal with, especially as an investigator, because when we investigate cases, our goal is to find those answers and to close a case. So to have one where we know what the answers are, but not be able to close it is kind of cumbersome.
You know, take me back 2 years ago today when you first got this case in your hands. Did it seem routine?
No, it kind of, to be honest, it kind of set me back a little bit. So, you know, when this case first started, CPS had reached out, and I had a conversation directly with the CPS caseworker. And she had shared some gut feelings that she had based off what she knew in the investigation so far. And it was one of those things where, you know, initially it's too hard to believe. It's not, that can't be what's going on here. So we gathered our team together and sat down with CPS, our team of investigators, and brought out some expertise to start looking at this case. And as it continued, it became more and more of a realization that, no, this is the reality, that we have a 6-year-old boy who's missing, and we didn't know the answers at the time to where he was at. You know, in the initial phases, we didn't know any of the information about them fleeing the country. We didn't know about passports. We didn't have any of that available to us yet. So it was very, very raw information, and we had a very intense feeling of urgency to try to find out what happened to the 6-year-old boy. Why did the mom up and abscond from the home with all of her kids and her husband? Where did they go? So we had a pretty large sense of urgency once the realization kind of set in that, no, this is a reality. We get a lot of cases where sometimes there's things that are reported, and we do an initial investigation, find out that that's not exactly the facts. And so I think that's part of the problem here is, you know, when you hear of the facts of this case, it's so wild. It's one of those cases that's hard to believe that it's true, but it is. It is.
The first time I walked into the trailer in the back of the house, I got an eerie feeling. Mm-hmm. Take me back to the first time you walked in there. What went through your mind?
You know, so I've been in law enforcement for almost 20 years now, and so I've worked a lot of cases, and nothing tells us more about a case than the scene usually. We can gather a lot of facts from the scene. And that was one of the concerning points that I've shared in all the press conferences before, is by the time we got into the home, we had knew that they had fled the country. But then when you see the living conditions and see how they were living, that the squalor that they were living in, the small spaces, how could they afford that? And that's what led to a lot of the other questions in the investigation that we had to try to track down and answer. Dealing with cases with kids is probably one of the hardest parts about the job as a law enforcement officer. I truly envy our CPI caseworkers. I truly envy and value all those that specialize in crimes against children, because that's a very hard job. And so then knowing that we're investigating a potential crime against a child, and we walk into the home to see these living conditions the way they were, it's absolutely an eerie feeling. It's a gut-wrenching feeling. And it's just not good.
Every stone turned over in this case?
You know, we ask ourselves that every week. And we go back and we may find a little pebble here and there that we continue to turn. I am very confident in all the experts that have come in on the case. I'm very confident in our team. The team that has been built to really investigate and work on this, in my opinion, of course, is not just the best locally. They're the best in the nation. Everybody that's been a part of this investigation that I've had a hand in working with have been absolutely committed to working on this case and finding those answers. So much so that they've taken time away from their families, they've taken time away from their private life to find these answers, because they find this case important, not just to them, but it's important to our community. So every week we ask ourselves that same question: have we turned over every stone? And we continue to push on that even now. As we continue to work on this case and try to find those answers, we continue to turn over stones and see what we can find and where it leads us.
Chief, take me back to the moment where you had to share with the public that you actually believed that Noel was no longer alive. That had to be hard for you.
It was. I'm very much an optimist. I'll be honest, I tried not to believe it even when we got to that point. I didn't want to believe that. I was still holding out hope that maybe there were some other options. But we were coming up on a time where we have just, with the investigative team that we had and all the work that they were doing, we had ruled out every possibility. And so I had to kind of come to grips with that and come to that realization. And then even in making that announcement, I mean, telling somebody that is really hard. We're talking about a 6-year-old boy, someone who suffered from intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, who needed some special care and some special love. And for a period of time in his life, he got that. But for a pretty good portion of his time, based off the investigation, it sounds like those things were taken advantage of and he was abused and neglected. And that's hard. That's hard to sit here and think not only about what transpired solely with his disappearance, but all the events that led up before that, and what this young boy had to go through, what Noel had to go through leading up to that was hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. And making that announcement was truly one of the toughest announcements I've ever, actually it is the toughest announcement I've ever had to make as a police chief.
Today, is there anybody in our community that you believe could still help with this case?
You know, we often beg for that information. In a case like this, it'll take one small thing, one tiny little bit of information that could blow this case wide open for us. We have our sets of priorities. One of those top priorities is still finding Noel and putting him to rest. Any bit of information could be the leading stone for that, and we beg people to, if you think of something, please share that with us. No matter how insignificant you might think it is, the reason we got to the point in this investigation is because of what people thought was insignificant information. Things like, well, I saw him, but he just didn't look healthy. Information about, well, one time Cindy had asked me to borrow my child for a doctor's appointment. Those kinds of things are valuable information in an investigation like this. So any recollection of any kind of interaction we want to know about, and that information could be very important to this investigation. So if that hasn't been shared with us, we definitely want to know.
What are the chances of getting her back here and her husband back here to face charges?
You know, I'm an optimist, so I try to be very positive with that. I've never had to go after somebody in a foreign country. I've never had to pursue somebody, especially in India. A lot of this is way above my pay grade, quite honestly. It's something I don't have any experience in, something I have no knowledge of. So we've had to rely very heavily on our federal partners who are pushing this from the federal side, who have that expertise and experience in it. And we keep holding out positive hope that this will come to fruition, that we can get her back and have her stand for justice on this case.
Is this one of those cases, Chief, where it stays with you your entire career until when?
This one will stick with everybody on this investigation for the rest of our lives. It's not uncommon. You know, I live here in the community, so every time I drive by the park and I see the Noel playground, every time I take my kids to that park, I think about Noel in this case all the time, and I know that many of our investigators are experiencing the exact same thing. This is something that will stick with us. I would like to be able to provide some level of closure. That's one of our goals. We need to provide some level of closure, not just for us, for the family, but for the community as a whole. And we get contacted all the time from people all over the country asking us for updates on this case. So this case has not just touched the lives of people here in Everman, it's touched the lives of everybody across the country. And so it's hard to not think about the magnitude of that. And it's hard to not think about wanting to provide that closure for everybody. And this will continue to stick with me personally for the rest of my career and probably the rest of my life.
If Cindy was in this room right now, what would you say to her about Noel?
The only thing I want to know from her, truly, is where is he? That's what I want to know. Where is he? She has told all these stories about selling him, about giving him to a family member, and we know that none of that is true. I just want to know the truth. Where is he? That's the one question that we all want the answer to is where is he? I don't need to know the whys. The whys don't matter to me. I want to be able to provide closure. I want to be able to provide a resting place for him. The whys will be a part of the investigation later, and of course a part of justice. But my priority is I want to know where he is. Where is he at, so we can put him to rest.
This is 2025. She could very well see this interview.
Yes.
If she sees this interview, what would you want her takeaway to be?
You know, there's other children involved, and we know that. Our concern is not just for Noel, but the safety of everybody. Do the right thing. Bring yourself back. Turn yourself in. Let us take care of everybody. I don't want what happened to Noel to happen to anybody else. I don't want anybody else to get hurt in the process of this. Justice is certainly one of the priorities, but safety is the number one. And that's where I think our concern is that we want to make sure that everybody else is safe. And if I had to send a message to her now, it would be a beg and a plea to just come back and turn yourself in.
As a police chief, as a father, any impact at all on you when you look at your children?
Yeah, you know, so my kids are 5. So it's very hard. I've got twins that are 5 years old. It's very hard to not make a connection when you investigate cases like this and think about your own kids. I can't imagine. I can't imagine ever putting my children through anything like that. It's gut-wrenching to me to imagine that. So yes, it is hard, and there have been times as a father to go back and look at my kids and not have a little bit of a gut-wrenching feeling thinking about what Noel went through, and then thinking about my kids. So it's very hard to provide that disconnect. As a police chief, it's hard to provide that disconnect because I have the opportunity to work with kids all the time. We work with kids in our school. Everman ISD has a very large population of young children in that age group. I get the opportunity to look at the smiles on their faces. I get the opportunity to make a positive impact in their lives every single day to some extent. Not knowing what these kids are going through at home, we do everything we can with these kids that are struggling at home to provide them at least a moment of happiness and cheerfulness in this work. So thinking about the impact I have as a police chief and then thinking about the family that I have at home, it's impossible to make that disconnect.